Hi, my name is Teresa So.
Hi, my name is Taylor Mbago.
My name is Samantha Lee.
We analyzed
The poem
Fern Hill.
Yeah! Now we will begin reading the auditory reading of the poem Fern Hill.
Now as I was young and easy under the apple boughs, about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above jingle starry, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heydays his eyes, and honored among wagons I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves, trail with daisies and barley, down the river of the windfall light. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns, about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home. In the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be, golden in the mercy of his means. And green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman, the calves. Sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath ran slowly, in the pebbles of the holy streams. All the sun long it was running, it was lovely, the hay. Field high as a house, the tunes from the chimneys, it was air, and playing lovely and watery, and fire green as grass, and lightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, the night jars, flying with the ricks and the horses, flashing into the dark. And then to awake in the farm, like a wanderer white, with the dew come back, the cock on his shoulder, it was all, shining it was Adam and maiden, the sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day, so it must have been after the birth of the simple light. In the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm, out of the whining green stable, on the fields of praise, and honored among foxes and pheasants, by the gay house, under the new made clouds, and happy as the heart was long, in the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways, my wishes raced through the house high hill, and nothing I cared, at my sky blue traders that time o' house. In all his tuneful turning, so few in such morning songs, before the children green and golden follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared, in the lamb white days, that time would take me, up to swallow thronged loft by the shadow of my hand. In the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep, I should hear him fly with the high fields, and wake up to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. Now to the background information. Dylan Thomas was born in Welsh seaport of Swansea, Carmarthenshire, on October 27, 1914, and he attended the Swansea Grammar School, so he was an educated man. Thomas told John Malcolm Brennan that he would only write happy poems, but then he realized that he was better at writing like a symmetry of both good and bad, and in 1945 he wrote Fern Hill, and this was inspired by his childhood experiences at his aunt's farm in Wales. Knowing the historical context is also important. Fern Hill was published after World War II. British people had time to look around and see how their world had changed. Many of the major cities were in ruins and needed rebuilding. The people of Britain desperately needed relief, and Thomas presented a nostalgic look back at more carefree days of innocence and freedom in Fern Hill. Here is our analysis and annotations.
Stanza 1 begins off by talking about his childhood. He describes his childhood as comfort and freedom, and often uses archetypal colors such as golden and green to represent fertility and greatness. He describes his childhood as his peak days and finishes off the stanza 1 with imagery to convey the landscape. Stanza 2 also reiterates what stanza 1 had said about him feeling like the center of the world, and continues to use archetypal images such as the sun, which can both be the giver and the destroyer of life. Also continues to personify time, as well as restating the archetypal colors. The last two lines of the stanza reflects the way children view time as moving slowly, which changes in adulthood.
Here in stanza 3, we see them give a description of the landscape of Fern Hill, and as he uses imagery to convey a sense of childlike joy and contentment, as he frolics around the fields and enjoys the childlike innocence of youth. In the line, and fire is green as grass. This is an archetypal image where fire symbolizes human knowledge, and in the ways that it can be both a protective and destructive force. Knowledge being given by time, which alludes to the apple in the Garden of Eden. Then near the end, we see the poet describe a dream in which his sanctuary of a farm is being taken away, and this foreshadows him growing up and losing his childlike innocence and the overall joy of youth. Now in stanza 4, the author awakes from his dream from the previous stanza, and he describes himself as a wanderer white, which is an archetypal, which uses archetypal imagery with the color white to symbolize innocence, purity, what you are when you are a child. We also see a allusion to the Garden of Eden in the third line where he says Adam and maiden. And finally, the poet takes a lot of time giving us a description of the sun, basically to emphasize the warmth and joy that surrounds the farm and the memories he holds with it.
In stanza 5, many of his ideas from previous stanzas are repeated. This repetition throughout resembles a pattern of childhood where days are like one another. The sun born over and over contrasts the sun being young once. A carefree attitude is continued to be expressed until line 42, which is the first time in the poem where we can see a shift from a child's view of life to an adult's view. He recalls the feeling of ease and freedom of childhood now as an adult, when time isn't as generous. The first line in stanza 6, the word white makes an appearance again, representing that because of his innocence he didn't understand the concept of time. As night falls, the farm gets taken away by time. He wakes up realizing the loss of the farm and that time no longer shows mercy, portraying the realities of adult life. Green is repeated once again, but is now the color of decay rather than youth. Now grown up, he has become a prisoner of time. Like the motion of the sea that is directed by the moon, he is directed by time.
Archetypal images are used throughout the poem. Green represents fertility, growth, youth. Golden represents greatness and value. White is purity and innocence, and blue is holiness, peace, and serenity. Allusion used in this piece is the Garden of Eden. Similar to the story Adam and Eve, this was implemented to convey the theme of a life in paradise for the loss of innocence. Here, the Garden of Eden is represented by the safety of childhood, and the forbidden fruit that results in the loss of innocence and security is represented by time.
Associations we made is holistic vs realistic, freedom vs constraint, innocence vs wisdom, childhood vs adult.
Alright, moving on to style and structure. It's a complex structure with internal rhyme throughout the poem, non-traditional rhyme scheme, 6 stanzas each, that contain 9 lines with a unique pattern of development and recurring sounds and reinforcements to show the mood. Elaborating more on Dylan Thomas's style, he uses very few periods and a lot of commas to show the flow of childhood life. Looking at this piece horizontally, you are able to see the humps and hills, alluding to the title Fern Hill.
Throughout the poem, there is a nostalgic tone. The tone shift happens in stanza 5, where loss is introduced and the perspective changes from a child's to an adult's outlook on life. That time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few and such mourning songs, can be interpreted as time allows the kid to do what he desires for the moment. But the word allows means that these days won't last forever and is controlled by time itself. The beginning of the poem has a joyful tone when reminiscing the days of childhood that contained freedom and ease, while after the tone shift and towards the end of the poem, the tone turns wistful and bittersweet, no longer containing an idealistic memory of childhood. The 3 main themes of this poem consist of nature, impermanence, and freedom. Nature is symbolized as the passing stage of admiration and inner peace, often used as imagery in this poem. The blissful feeling of nature he felt as a child is comparable to the paradise that is the Garden of Eden. For impermanence, the poem shifts from past tense to present tense when the author finishes recalling the joys of childhood and switches to expressing the boundaries that time creates in adulthood. He is regretful for not fully appreciating his childhood that as a kid felt like it was going to last forever. Freedom is associated with the times of childhood where he got to live life with ease and no restraints. As he gets older though, time imprisons him. Dylan Thomas writes Fern Hill to express his feelings towards growing up. He creates a strong emotional response through his unique use of imagery. We reach this conclusion because throughout the poem he talks about the idealistic memories of his childhood, while later stating the restraining life of adulthood. The sun and moon archetypes support the author's purpose because the sun resembles the giver as well as the destroyer of life, and the moon resembles the passage of time that takes place when he grows up. The archetypal image of green specifically resembles youth and growth, except for in the last stanza where it represents decay.
This is Before by Teresa So, Samantha Lee, and Taylor M. The last Christmas before its arrival, lights were strung, surrounded by crisp blue skies. Little did we know freedom would soon pass. Off guard, time threw us. Bluer were the days when business was not phased. Before the spread, the streets were filled. Once below a time, families could thrive. Soon trailed with distance and goodbyes. Up went the numbers along with despair. And as I was blue and peaceful, friends along the bayou, in our hearts young once only. COVID let us play and be, but soon became our kryptonite. New year arrived, but mercy did not follow. Starry nights were plagued with adversity. Not long ago, heydays were common. 6 feet apart we stood, in the shadows of what once was.
For watching.
Hugs and bubbles.